We've just had Nick Line on the podcast. Nick's just very recently joined CFC, so very grateful to him for carving out some time in his day to come and join us. I thought that was a really open, honest conversation.
Yeah.
Really grateful, actually, how he went into his experience of leadership, especially in the early days of assuming leadership roles, what he struggled with. Actually, he was overly empathetic, which hindered him actually probably making decisions that he should have made earlier.
His style of leadership really resonated with me personally.
And dare I say, I think it might with particularly female leaders as well.
I think it's just this idea of horses for courses, right? Do you lead from the front or do you lead from the back? And Nick was talking about how his leadership style is very, from the back rather than,
Yeah, I thought that comment on being criticised for overly delegating earlier on in his career, that was again interesting to hear.
Yeah, and being ruinously empathetic. Yeah, so it's a fantastic conversation, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for joining us on the Damhurst podcast. And I think we're just going to go and dive straight in, and it would be great to hear from you your kind of defining moments of your career to date, looking back.
Well, I think if you go way back to, I think the year 2000, 2001, I joined a company called Terranova in the insurance market. A lot of people have heard of it. And 24th of March 2000, Markel bought Terranova. And that was a real defining moment in my career. People sometimes ask me for my best careers advice or best career move. And actually, I didn't have to do anything. And I learned so much. And people ask me for the best advice I've received. I had a bit of advice at the time. Stay put, don't get itchy feet. Let's see what happens. It might be educational to go through an M&A process, whatever happens. And I stayed for another 25 years.
Amazing. So amazing it had been that quickly upon joining, because that was your first entry into the insurance world, was it?
I'd done a couple of years of actuarial consulting, and there was it was a bit of a wave of actuaries moving into the London market as things became a little bit more regulated, a little bit more scientific, and I joined that bandwagon. And I was very lucky. I joined at a really good time, just before, about 2 years before Markel turned up.
What were your biggest sort of takeaways from that integration?
Well, the Terranova business I joined was a bit of a mishmash of different businesses that had come together and not really been fully integrated. All of a sudden, this chap called Tony Markel literally turned up in our office the following day. He's a huge man, very tall, very deep voice, great authority with him. And he did these stump speeches around the building saying, "Hello, we're Markel, we're welcome to Markel." And in the following days, weeks, months and years, the leadership he showed was really inspirational. His cousin Steve, who was sort of part of the double act running Markel, both showed incredible strength and commitment to what they were trying to do. They didn't really know the London market that well. They kept being told what they were trying to do wouldn't work in London, and they wouldn't hear it. They just said, "This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to measure our business. This is how we're going to grow. This is how we're going to work with our business partners." The whole philosophy, what we call the Markel style, was laid out, and they stuck to it in front of a lot of opposition, and a lot of people left, either by choice or by request. That was formative for me, seeing two leaders in action.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think about the path not travelled if Markel hadn't come a-calling?
I do sometimes, and I do wonder. I'm sure I would have survived and done something else, but just catching that wave was incredibly lucky for me. It was a real sliding doors moment. There'd been a couple of times where Markel had come close to the acquisition and then not, and then they did in the end. But I do think, what if? I don't know. To be honest, I think we can say this with the fullness of time. Terranova might not have lasted very long. Anyway, we had 9/11, we had reserve movements, so I probably would have ended up somewhere else. And I don't know. So that was a huge sliding doors moment for me. I don't try to think about it too much.
Yeah. What was the attitude? What was the approach? What was the mindset that you had at that time to make the best of a scenario that you weren't necessarily expecting a few months prior?
That's a very good question, because it's not always luck, is it?
Yeah.
So I worked extremely hard.
Yeah.
I realised that I was in charge of reserving at the time and delivering the results. And I realised that there was a lot of bad news coming with the way the claims were coming in at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. And I felt a level of responsibility to them to tell them what was going on. And they created that responsibility in me because of their leadership. And so I worked as hard as I could. I was super brutally honest with them. Mm-hmm. And you could say, well, I was fairly young at the time, so it didn't really matter. I was speaking truth to power, as people say now. But I would sit in front of Tony and Steve and say, this is how bad things have got since you were last quarter, and was just completely honest. And I tried to add a bit of humour to it a little bit as well, but I found myself presenting to them for days on end the results of my work and my team's work. So if I had to put my success down to something, it was hard work, and it was just being brutally honest and analytical and explaining things. I love explaining things to people who don't get something, because I've normally had to spend time understanding it myself. So when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to explain it, you can almost see the comprehension in their eyes. And that was what I took responsibility for. And you could say glibly, my entire career at Markel, 25 years, was based on how I did then in the first 3 or 4 years. So I think I made the best of it.
Yeah. And when you sort of talk about hard work, what did that look like in sort of a practical sense? Because it's very easy to say, I just worked hard. And sort of burning the midnight oil might not end up in kind of the right outcome or the right output. What did at that time of your career, which is quite formative and relatively early on, when you thought, I'm going to work through this, I'm going to work hard, what did that look like practically?
Well, in very practical terms, we didn't have working from home then. So it did mean coming to the office, staying super late. The classic, what am I going to have off the snack machine for dinner tonight? Which flavour crisps and which bar of chocolate? And then going in at the weekend. And I just got married and started a family back then, so it was quite difficult. But what it really meant was being super curious as to what was happening with what had happened with our underwriting, what was happening with claims, what was happening with US casualty or worldwide travel or whatever. And people hadn't really gone around businesses in London asking these kind of questions before, of underwriters of claims teams phoning people in the US or phoning people around the world going, what's happened? So, and in some ways, like a lot of my generation, we had to find new ways of analysing problems. We had literally had to get whatever data we could and stick it together in some kind of spreadsheet and work out where it was going, and then explain it to Steve and Tony Markel. So I think the hard work was really that strong desire to understand. I love understanding how things work. And if I'm not happy, I don't understand why, I'll keep digging. And it became a bigger and bigger team effort as we found out what was going on. So the hard work was curiosity, I think, not being satisfied, because I wanted to sit in front of them with the full answer, not like, well, I gave up asking people because no one would tell me. I got to the bottom of every question.
And what in your career, or what decision in your career has ever felt risky, or have you not been a risk taker, and has that actually ultimately paid off?
I've been quite risk averse in my career, and I didn't realise it for a long time until maybe more recently. I mean, obviously, when you look back and you realise you haven't moved jobs for 25 years, you think, I've been a bit risk averse. I think my background is that my grandparents were from very humble beginnings, and they grafted and they worked hard. My parents worked hard to get me to where I was with look at my background. And I guess my point there was to sort of almost take the gains that they had made and not put it at risk. I think if I'd been a couple of generations ago, I might have taken more risk because I had less to lose. So maybe in retrospect, my job has been to consolidate where my family's been, and I've not taken a lot of risk. There were times when I could have done different things, but for my sanity, workload, family, I decided to carry on and stay what I was doing, which was great fun with great people. So I never felt I was really letting myself down by not moving elsewhere.
And you evolved.
I evolved. My career evolved. Obviously, I was chief actuary for 15 years, whilst that role evolved from reserving to pricing to capital modelling to catastrophe modelling. The company I was in was growing internationally, so travel and different people and everything else evolved. So, it was like changing jobs multiple times. And of course, the big change became when I became CEO as well.
That must have felt like a bit of a risk, like you're leaving behind sort of one career, albeit, changing career, albeit within the same culture, environment, the same people. That must have felt like a risk at the time, or did it?
It was a risk. I felt like I'd been asked to consider the role. So I felt like I had a willing audience. I was staying within the organisation. I had that strong link back to the US parent and the credibility from them. I'd been told that all the underwriters respected me, even though we'd had a lot of fights about their results. I had their respect. So I felt it was low risk to some degree in my own head. The alternative would have been carrying on as chief actuary or go somewhere else to be chief actuary at another company with bigger numbers and more zeros or something else. But it was more interesting for me to take that CEO role. So in much respect, it was a bit of a risk, but I felt it was a fairly safe one. Big change though. I learned a lot with that change, and to have that opportunity to switch like that, and I was mid-40s, and get the chance to learn and go again, that's a real privilege to be able to do that. I was very lucky.
Do you think you would have been able to make that move externally? Do you think at either now or back then? But do you think it's possible to make a move from chief actuary to CEO when you're not a known entity within the organisation that you're joining?
I think it's hard. There are a lot of CEOs who are actuaries in the market.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those have done that move internally first.
Yeah.
Because they've got that credibility and people know how they work. People understand that they've worked commercially like I did. And they've built up that internal respect, and then they make the move.
Okay.
I think it might be probably easier now, but maybe 10 years ago, do it internally first.
And what do you think it was about your, not necessarily your technical experience, reserving, pricing, capital, because that's sort of a given, but what do you think it was about your experience over the preceding sort of decades that positioned you to become, to take on the CEO for Markel International?
Well, some of the things I've already said, I guess, is a lot of respect from the US operation and trust from them. They're running an operation from a distance. They need to trust who's overseeing.
And how did you earn that trust?
I think all the work I did in the early days. I think my relationship with the underwriters was good. I'd always been quite commercial, professional, and we're very clear red lines professionally on what we were doing, but also really understanding the underwriter's business. It surprises me still when someone goes, "Oh, I met an actuary and he was quite commercial, or she was commercial, or they spoke to me and looked me in the face." But a lot of us do that now. But at the time, I had a lot of good respect with the underwriters, a really good relationship with them, and I think also, the CEO said to me at the time, underwriting is going to become more data led, and who best to lead us that way than you? So he kind of convinced me to take that risk, because when he mentioned the idea, I said, "Well, don't be ridiculous. I've never underwritten before. How can I be CEO?" And he said, "Well, for these reasons," and that's where we went.
And any failures along the way? And if so, how have you overcome them or approached them?
Many, many failures. Obviously, we don't learn unless we fail generally. There's two types of failure. The most glaring ones are usually with people.
Mm-hmm. Do you think actually that?
I think our biggest responsibility as managers and leaders is people, is choosing people and then allocating them their jobs and defining their jobs and making sure they're able to get on with it. So big mistakes are not doing that properly, hiring the wrong people, not giving people honest feedback. So again, somewhat late in my career, I had some garden leave recently, and I read lots of books, one of which was Radical Candor.
Oh yes, I've heard of this.
And there's 4 quadrants, and the other quadrant is ruinous empathy. And I was very much a culprit, I guess, of being ruinously empathetic with people and not being really clear on where they were falling short and trying to help them, but not being really strict enough. And then for having to take some kind of action because I was told to, and that was a failure on my part to help them. So in trying to help somebody, you actually don't help them. That's what I've learned over the last 10 or 15 years. So big issues with people, either backing the wrong people or not supporting people. A few technical failures as well. We had a fairly sizable loss in COVID, and I felt like that was on me because I was the CEO. I'd been the CEO for 2 years when COVID happened, and we had quite a big loss. You could say it was a people issue, but really it was an oversight issue. And I felt very responsible for that, even though you could point to multiple other failures that had happened before that. But I personally felt a lot of responsibility for that. And that was quite tough for all of us at the time, but also feeling that the company had lost money and I was the CEO at the time.
Mm-hmm. And by ruinous empathy, that has that sort of almost on reflection thinking that empathy has got in the way of actually making a call on something? Is that what
it certainly did. Yeah, certainly early on when I first became a manager, early chief actuary, I was very green. And you get given a bit of training, but perhaps not enough specific training and profiling. Mm-hmm. Whereas now you would do a Hogan and other kind of tests like that and work out who you are quite quickly and what your, let's say, your learning objectives are. But I certainly started off being very empathetic with everybody. So anybody who behaved in a certain way or was unable to do something, I would always be super sympathetic. Like, well, that's what they were taught, or that's how they are, and we'll work with them. Mm-hmm. And being a bit too lenient. Mm-hmm. And that's something I certainly had to learn.
Thinking about any feedback you've had on leadership, actually, has there been one bit of advice that you've received or on leadership that's really resonated and helped?
I was certainly told a lot that I was too soft on people.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
And I've worked on that. But I was also told a lot that I over-delegated. Mm-hmm. I gave people too much, not too much work, but too much, I guess, width, breadth, latitude to do the work. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that went wrong because people would do the wrong work and there'd be a presentation that didn't go well. Well, Nick, you've clearly over-delegated. You need to take back control. And I did not ever respond to that because I just felt that was wrong. So I kind of stubbornly carried on delegating the way I thought until I eventually found a way. There's a book I read that sort of showed me the best way to do that. So that was actually a bit of advice I refused to take, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. What was the book?
There's a book I read 10, 15 years ago. And if you ask anybody in the market who knows me and you stop in the street and say, what book would Nick recommend? He'd recommend Turn the Ship Around by David Markel. Read it 10, 15 years ago. And I read the whole thing. I watched the video on YouTube and went, aha, now I get how you can delegate with a certain amount of control and oversight. And ever since then, literally read the book, did a presentation to my team and said, right, this is how we're going to operate.
Okay.
And I've been trying and often failing to implement that ever since. But that gives me my framework to work around.
Mm. And it's interesting because there are, for listeners who might be wanting to become leaders and hearing, you admit earlier on in your career being at times too soft with those you're overseeing. Why was that? Was there a little bit of people pleasing there with sort of just not wanting to spare people's blushes, or and how did you kind of toughen up in a way? And was it just through reading? And are you someone who is quite self-taught as a leader and reflective? And
yeah, I didn't have a lot of really strong role models to copy, to be honest. I think my softness with people was just because I like to be nice to people.
Yeah.
And I'm quite, I don't like criticism myself that much, so I don't like to give it. So I was just being too nice to people, basically. But over time you realise that actually it's ruinous, literally, and you're not helping them and you're not helping the rest of the team. And you have to steel yourself and realize that to help people, you have to be really candid with them.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's what I learned. And whether that was my upbringing, the way, a big important part of my life was my grandfather, who was an absolutely lovely man. I spent hours sitting watching cricket with him as I was growing up, and he was very good with people. I always felt like to mimic him, I had to be nice with people. And he was what we now call an HR director. He was head of personnel. And there was one time something happened, and I said to my mum, "Well, Grandpa would have done it this way." And she said, "Well, actually, no, he wouldn't. He was often quite tough with people." And I had this real kind of shock. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. You can be nice to people most of the time, but you also have to be tough with them when it's appropriate. And that was a bit of a moment there.
I mean, that leads us on to sort of influences from childhood that have shaped your values now as a leader. And I mean, what have been your key influences from those formative years that sort of you see show up, as it were, today?
I think, again, my grandparents and my parents taught me a lot of humility, sort of charity, helping people. My grandfather, again, he used to do loads of volunteering when he was young, sports clubs, boys clubs, all that kind of stuff. My parents, again, did lots of volunteering, hospitals, all sorts of stuff. And I think as a family, we tended to try and help people where we could. It was always it's a cliche, but helping people less fortunate than ourselves. And I think because of where we'd come from just a generation before, we all felt very lucky and blessed, and we wanted to help other people. So, my mother had me out supporting hospital radio when I was young, going around the wards collecting record requests from patients, and I did that every Saturday morning for years. And you're seeing people in all sorts of illnesses, and that desire to help people, I think, was quite strong, and I think that hopefully I'm transmitting that through my kids as well.
Because where did you grow up? Was it
in Winchester, in Hampshire?
Yeah.
So Winchester Hospital, I was there every Saturday morning, collecting record requests from people.
And from a young age, had you always had the ambition to go far in your career? Could young Nick see himself now where you are?
I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I liked maths.
Because you read maths, didn't you?
I read maths. I knew I liked maths. I had no idea what to do with it. I liked science. I didn't know whether I was going to be a doctor, potentially, or a maths teacher, or whatever. And it was only when I found out about the actuarial profession, and you realise it's a profession, you get qualification, you get a decent job at the end, you use lots of maths, and I looked into it, and then I got an internship and went from there. But I wouldn't have imagined I'm doing this back then. And even when I became an actuary and qualified as an actuary, if you'd said, running forward, you're going to do a job which is actually not actuarial, well, it is actuarial, but I'm not trading as an actuary today, that would surprise me. If you told me when I was 25, that'd be a shock.
What was the moment where you thought, rather than just being an actuary for the rest, because obviously it was head of reserving, chief actuary, CEO, what was there a moment in time where you thought, no, I can be a leader, whether it is a leader of the underwriting team or the actuarial team, or is it just, I'm just going to carry on up the vertical career? Was there ever that light bulb moment where you thought, no, I can do this?
I think when I started getting feedback that people enjoyed working with me, that I'd trained people up well, as we built the actuarial team, literally from scratch, I wanted to get people out around the table in front of Steve and Tony Markel, not to take the heat off me, but actually to get them to take responsibility for their work and learn. And of course, you hire people who don't want to do public speaking, they don't want to go in there, and we'd train them and we'd do mock sessions. And it got to the point where we'd go through a day's meetings and I wouldn't have to speak much because everybody else was speaking, which to me was a real win. And at the end of the day, somebody would say, "Well done, Nick, you've built a great team." Oh, that's nice. That's good, because that's what I'm trying to do. And my ambition was always to speak as little as I could and get everyone else to be able to answer questions. And then I had this epiphany that actually it was quite nice to hire people and have them do things that they thought they couldn't do and surprise themselves, which is a real pleasure. That's probably the first time I realised I was building a team, and not just doing maths. Yeah.
And how did you what's your philosophy around building and creating that team? Because a leader is only as good as his or her team. How did you go about thinking about that and curating that and crafting that unit?
Well, good advice I had was to get people who make up for your own gaps and knowledge or skills and everything else. So we tried to do a bit of that. And then hiring people who were quite rounded. So I can talk you through a load of interviews I've been in where I've interviewed somebody, they clearly make the grade, but then someone will say something about something they did. And I think, oh, actually, that's quite interesting. Oh, you did this and then you did that and then you ran a marathon, or then you did this and you did that in the rugby team and then whatever. And that was I was always looking for that extra bit of interest, character that a lot of people have actually once you dig into it. So bringing in people who I could put in front of Tony Markel, and who would be able to be presentable even if they didn't know it yet, and then train them up and like I've said, give them. One of my favourite phrases about leadership is you're trying to show people the space in front of them and then you let them move into it, and that's what I was doing all the time. And the space in front of them was this space at the boardroom table every quarter, and then you get them there.
And what's the space in front of you right now?
Oh goodness me! Well, I've got a huge space in front of me.
Yeah.
So I've been at CFC for 10, nearly 11 weeks, and I'm still learning. I'm learning the business. I'm learning the people. I'm looking for ways in which I can lead this team of amazingly successful underwriters who've done such a brilliant job over a long period. And they have so much ahead of them. The more I get into the business, the more opportunity I see. And it's quite hard to imagine that from the outside, because you look at this business and where it's come over 25 years, what it's done, what it's achieved in many, many ways of measuring it. And you think, well, that's all the juice has been squeezed out of it. I look at everything. We're looking at planning. We're looking at opportunities. And what actually literally wakes me up sometimes in the middle of the night, how are we going to do all these opportunities? How are we going to choose which one? So there's a huge amount of space in front of us as a business. And for me to succeed in the role and to bring up and help and support the leaders working with me, there's a lot of space there for me. It's going to be great fun.
You were quite risk averse throughout your career, sort of nearly 30 years at the same company, albeit doing a variety of different roles. And there's a lesson in that, definitely. What was the reasoning behind, not necessarily moving to CFC, but leaving behind Markel to go and do something different rather than spend the rest of your career at Markel?
I could have easily stayed there to retirement. I think a lot of people thought that I would. I had a little bit of feeling a year or two ago that things had been a little bit the same from one quarter to the next, just a little tiny bit. I felt like a lot of the challenges that we'd been through so many, and things had sort of stabilised quite a lot. We had great people doing fantastic jobs in all departments. All the things I'd almost dreamt of doing 25 years ago had been done. Fantastic underwriters, fantastic actuarial team, fantastic data, analytics, pricing, everything. International expansion, that was phenomenal. But when this opportunity came up, it was really about CFC. This is about a business that I've admired for nearly 10 years. These are people that I've met and know reasonably well, but a culture and it's a unique business. And that's what really drew me to it. It's the opportunity to work in a business that's tech forward, that will give me probably more than a ringside seat as AI gets developed and pushed through this market. It's a different part of the market, being an MGA ostensibly, although I think it's a bit of a hybrid model. This was a real pull for me. And in fact, when I was going for the first meeting, it was literally where I can give you a long list of companies that I'm not interested in and a very short list of companies that I would be, and CFC was top of that list by miles. So it was actually a very easy decision. I don't think I actually made the decision. It just sort of happened in a straight line. My sleepless nights were really about how I was going to tell my colleagues and my friends that I'd made that decision. That kept me awake for many, many weeks.
And what do you think people misunderstand in the current climate about being a leader at the top? What's a common misconception?
Well, I guess in the current climate, that's a really good question, because I think the way leadership should be going is perhaps opposite to what we're seeing on the news in terms of leadership. I think people want to see what I think of as the David Marquet type of leadership, which is very much letting people make their own decisions and setting people up to succeed themselves. Literally, he talks about, people think that leadership is like, or being a submarine captain is like being Russell Crowe marching up and down barking orders. And he's very much against that. He's very much thinking that I will give as few orders as I possibly can. And there'll be a whole load of orders that I refuse to give because other people can make those decisions. So the misconception that you have to look strong, give orders, belittle people or whatever, that's a misconception. I think a lot of leaders now understand that and are more in line with the way I'm thinking with how things should work. People, when they're working for me, also have a misapprehension that I'm going to give them lots of orders. And when I refuse, they think I'm maybe not doing the job or doing my job, and they're a bit confused. So I have to say, well, I literally am not going to tell you how to do that. But you've done this before, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it because I don't know what you know. You're the best person to solve this. Here are my red lines in terms of a few ground rules. And that surprises people sometimes because they expect to be given everything on a plate, or they expect to be given orders and instructions, which I won't do.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any difference in generations with that surprise? Is it a generational thing, or is it just an industry cultural thing where people are just used to being told what to do?
Yeah, I think it's a generation thing. I think people actually want more autonomy. And we know as people grow up, they want more autonomy. They don't want to be told exactly how to do everything. So there's definitely a generational shift from what we can call the Russell Crowe command and control approach with the big, strong leader and everyone following. I think today's generations want that more, perhaps flatter structure where I'm the leader because I just happen to have got here sooner and I've done a lot of this stuff before and I can help you get there, not because I'm bigger, better, I've got a deeper voice or a firmer handshake than everybody else. That's a different thing. And I think people want that. People generally want that kind of approach.
And what if you could have your time again? Or sort of advice that you would give to sort of a 20-something-year-old in the market today that does have ambitions, aspirations to get to the top. What would you do differently? What advice would you give? Either your younger self or...
Yeah, I don't think I would have tried and tell myself to take more risks because of where I've come from. That'd be too much of a change. I think if I look back, I should have believed in certain things more strongly and pushed them harder. I think when I was younger, I had this crazy idea that the leaders and the senior people I worked with knew everything and I didn't. So if I was suggesting things and they weren't enacted, I must be wrong, even though I kind of felt like I was right. And I should have fought harder for certain things sooner. And because of when I got to my role quite young and I was dealing with people who were technically my peers but were a generation ahead, that was quite difficult. I think I was quite firm and quite stubborn when I had to be, but I wish I'd been more forthright in things that I believed in and push things ahead more.
The courage of conviction versus self-doubt. What do you do to push through and speak up?
That's a really good point, because I was full of self-doubt back then and therefore not pushing forward. So I've learnt so many times now that something I believed in and didn't push forward retrospectively turned out to be true, and I wish I had. And that's happened enough for me to know that I can't keep letting that happen. I think the other thing about the self-doubt is humbly thinking, actually, I'm well qualified to do what I'm doing. I'm the right person to be doing this. Other people could also be doing it, but I'm just as good as anybody else to be doing this. So I'm not going to feel any kind of imposter syndrome. I refuse to think that, to believe that. And just having that belief that you do have the right, whether it's the the experience, where you've been, what you've done, things you've done, that's enough to be in the position you're in, and then you deserve it.
Have you always had that ability to refuse to believe in imposter syndrome, or is that something that you've learned as you've sort of gone through your career?
Oh, I've learned it very late.
Yeah.
No, I spent a lot of time thinking, what am I doing as chief actuary? I'm only like 32.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I think we can probably say this now. If me was trying to apply for chief actuary role now, the PRA would never allow it. But about then, we were picking the reserves for the whole of Markel. All those reserves and those loss ratios we were picking were going into people's bonuses. So my team were effectively selecting numbers that were impacting the bonuses of 800 people, 1,000 people, whatever. And that kind of felt like a huge responsibility. And then I kind of remembered something that you get told as you come through the actuarial profession is sometimes you should not do something because you're not qualified to do it, which is the main important thing. We should tell people that. But sometimes something has to be done and you're the most qualified person in the room to do it. And therefore you should do it. And I sat there thinking, well, if it's not me doing this, who's going to do it? The underwriters can't do it because they're conflicted. Finance don't know what's going on in the numbers and the reserve. So, the best person to be doing this is me. So as much as I feel a lot of responsibility, actually I'm the best person to do this in the room, which is quite, for me, a difficult conclusion to come to. But you have to get there. Otherwise you go and hide in a room in the dark. Don't come in.
That's really good advice. If there's somebody more qualified than you to make the decision, great, fine. But if you actually look around and you are that person, then that's a good way of dealing with sort of that imposter syndrome, that inability to...
With a caveat to the actuaries watching, that if it's something that you're really not qualified to do it, you shouldn't be doing
fair.
it. Yeah.
Fair.
And then the final question that we tend to ask is, if you're going into a board meeting or if you've got a busy day ahead, do you have a go-to song that you would put your headphones on and listen to get you in the mood for the day?
Oh gosh, well, so favourite bands would be Oasis and James from my childhood, but a song that I really love that I think has got the right vibe is Bohemian Like You by the Dandy Warhols.
Okay,
if you know it.
Yeah.
It was on a Vodafone advert for a long time, and it's an absolute banger. So that's my go-to one song. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Good. Thank you.
Nick, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.